information not only needs to come, at the right quantity, and given to the people and interpreted to the people, but also needs to be given in sufficient time. We felt a lot of it was rushed. People need this information upfront, so that they are able to have reflected on it, to be able to come and have a discussion. For instance, we gave them information and told them read it right away, get to understand it right away, and that was a challenge. I think another lesson which is related to that is that, of course, a bit of the discussion requires a certain level of literacy, unless that information is interpreted, one, in either Swahili or in mother tongue in some of these communities. In the three counties, they were all very different. Murang'a, Turkana and Homa Bay are very, 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 very different.
In Murang'a, there were very heated arguments around the choices that they were making. But then a lot of that was informed by people's own understanding about how government sectors work and what the objective of those sectors should be. And in a way, we found people borrowing a lot from their own experiences. So if it is in education or infrastructure, there was a general conceptualization with the group about how those sectors should work in determining the development agenda of the country. And so we noticed there was a bit more of borrowing from experiences than the information that we had presented before them.
I would give infrastructure 60%.
Infrastructure 60?
And give education 40%. We were trying to see, after 4 years, we produced 1 million from 4 rivers. 70,000 got to university. Out of the 70,000, 10% are focus and material. The remaining 930,000 are Kulima, and they are not adding as much as infrastructure would. Garissa Road was built by NYS sometimes back. NYS guys are trained for 6 months. And they built that road, and it's one of the best roads in the country. So we don't need to put 70% in education so that we produce great minds. We just need to be organized.
I want us to draw back our minds to the time that Africa was getting their independence.
Yes.
That governments that invested in education first were able to absorb the students. Wenye walikuwa wanamaliza wakaabsorb kwa kazi vizuri. So the population was getting employed. But those governments that decided that they needed to send away the Europeans and the colonialists without getting the educated people, their companies were collapsing. So I tend to believe that the one that should get much more government support is education, so that it boosts the other projects.
60 to education and 40 to infrastructure. How many? 3? Oh, the number has gone up? 1, 2, 3, 4. Infrastructure 60% and education 40%. How many? So Turkana is one of the marginalized counties up north, and I think for Turkana again, this was a mixed group where you had professionals, you had business people, you had people who basically don't work, and again this is one group that didn't have very many people who've engaged with the budget before. But I think one thing that we noticed with Turkana, number one, is that they seemed to have a very clear idea after going through the information that we presented them on the information that they would need to better understand the process and to better make the decisions that we were asking them to make that day, which was pretty interesting and is something that we did not see in Murang'a. So in Turkana, there was a bit more clarity in terms of the information that they think they would need to engage better with budgets, which I think was a big plus. And the reason why that might have been the case is also because we saw people in Turkana borrow a lot more from the materials that we presented them.
The literacy is at over 80%. That, and then the infrastructure of education, they are still low, because we are talking about a community that has been marginalized for over 50 years. The other thing that is very contentious, the reason why answering that question is very difficult, we just discovered oil. Economy here is very poor. Employment rate is also very low. So while exploring energy might cause employment to the community around. So in my view, because they are all important, employment is as important as education, I will give it a 50-50.
Wengi ambao wamesoma zaidi na hawana wote kazi. So mimi kwa hiyo 100 nitapatia energy and infrastructure 60. Alafu education nitapatia 40. Kwa sababu tutengeleze kazi kwa wale watu ambao wamemaliza shule kwanza. Hao ambao watapata kazi wakuje, wengine watakuja watasaidia jamii yao na watasomesha wale wengine.
Not all will be employed in the white collar jobs, indicating that a lot of resources should go to education such that as many people as possible can be educated, and those ones who cannot be employed in the white collar jobs can be employed, can self-employ themselves. In the infrastructure, as we have gone through the document, we have found that some sectors can provide money for itself, like the petroleum. It will sell its petrol and it will get its money from elsewhere. So I tend to think education should be given more. In this case, 70. And then the other one will get 30.
How many are for 70-30 by a show of hands? Aya. How many are for 60-40? So our decision is 70-30.
In Homa Bay, we saw a lot of, because one of the expectations with deliberations is that people will, give proposals, there will be counter proposals, and people will push each other to justify why they are giving certain proposals. And we saw that in Homa Bay, basically all rounded. Homa Bay had very good discussions. I think also the fact that I think the group we had in Homa Bay also had professionals, people from the CSO world. Is definitely Homa Bay had more heated discussions, but at the same time we saw a lot of the counter checking.
Most of these departments in IAA, you need education. From basic to tertiary education, for you to be employed in the Department of Energy, for you to be employed in the AII department, you need basic education. So if we invest more on education, every other department, including the IAA, will just fall in place.
Like, we're talking of education, right? We have trained engineers, we have teachers, and we have doctors. Yet we don't have infrastructure. Now that's my one. Because we train them, yet we are not utilizing the resource. So to me, I was saying that infrastructure is the core to any economic development.
When I look at infrastructure and energy, I'm looking at roads, I'm looking at buildings, I'm looking at power, I'm looking at everything that supports the people who will be taking part in the research. So I will say if I was to give 70, then I will be taking 70 to energy and infrastructure. That is where my argument is. Because we're looking at how supportive. We need, yes, we do need, education needs an allocation. According to me, the allocation that they need is will be consumed, and it's on salaries and it's on research, and it's on administration and operations. But then again, when we're looking at roads, how much of it do we have? We need to access either the health facilities, we need to access educational centers, we also need to have more buildings, we also need to build more ICT hubs, we also need to have more power supplied into these areas.
Relation to Gen 60. More education.
Yeah, energy 40, education 60.
Okay, that's one.
Energy 60, education 40.
So we decided we at least raise on social protection to 30%, and then have governance, justice, law and order at 70%. And these are the reasons. Reason number one, when we increase that on social protection, we are likely to decrease the crime rates. And once we decrease the crime rates, the proportion we had taken from governance will be taken because crime itakuwa kidogo, kwa hivyo polisi will not need those equipments and whatever. That is, and we will achieve that by giving women loans, vijana, kuwajengea viwanja. That's point number one. Reason number two, we need to focus on the less fortunate in our society, the street children, the people with disabilities. We need to bring them level with the common person so that they are not discriminated against, wakue at the same level. That's the reason number two. Reason number three, there's this thing called dependency levels in our society, whereby if I am working, I'm feeding my grandfather, my grandmother, my 8 children, my disabled neighbor. So when we increase the social protection allocations, we will see the government will take care of those the elderly, watachukua shosho, wachukue the people with the disabilities, yule kijana street boy naendaga nikipatia mkate asubuhi, he will be taken care of. So mimi ile natafuta itakuwa yangu, and maybe I'll be able to invest somewhere and grow the economy.
For governance, justice, law and order, we give it 70%. The GLO sector consists of 14 MDS, 20 semi-autonomous government agencies, and 15 tribunals that require a huge chunk of money for operation. So we give it that 70%. While the other sector, that is social protection, culture, and recreation, has got only 6 departments, 6 MDAs and 20 SAGS. So we gave it 30%. For governance, justice, and law, there were key priority issues that require funding. For instance, we saw security as a major factor, as a major element in governance that requires huge funding. Quite a big number of emerging issues in governance, justice, law, and order that require immediate or rather adequate funding. A good example is, for instance, we are just migrating from an electioneering period. So we need key areas, key agencies like the National Human Rights Commission, properly funded. We need more money for the judiciary to complete cases. We don't see much in emerging issues from the other sector, that is social protection, culture, and the recreation sector.
The two sectors, apart from funding from the budget, can have self-funding. For example, SPCR, talent. On talent, we felt that talent is self-paying, and if you get to that level where your talent goes international, you can give back to the society, and that is a source of funding. And then the other organizations, NGOs, have also invested on that sector, and other sectors within the government, like the National Government Affirmative Act Fund. So they get funding from all over, and that balances. The second reason, the other department, which is the GJLO, also has funding from AIAs, for example, in the correctional facilities. I really don't like using that word because it does not live up to its name. So the correctional facilities, these guys make antiques, they make furniture, they sell them. I believe these products from the prisons, that money should come back and help these various departments. The two sectors are interwoven, hence the success from one sector ensures the success of the other. And the third reason is that the society or taxpayers are if they are socially protected, the rule of law will be upheld, vices curbed, and the need to allocate more on GJL will lack relevance. If a society is socially protected, we won't need policemen to run around. People will be busy. We have libraries, guys are busy taking on sports activities, guys are busy in institutions, and our culture is, we are making culture look graceful. Like we are learning from other cultures, they are learning from us, and we tap it in a way that it can generate some sort of income from amongst us. So if that is the kind of setup we have in our society, we won't need correctional facilities and law enforcers on our backs. So that is why we felt the 50-50 allocation was relevant.
Protection, we have given it 40%, and governance, justice, law and order, we have given it 60%. Reason number one as to why we give the governance 60% is because in governance there are a lot of departments compared to social, whereby the governance sector requires or does a lot of perils. Reason number two is that the government has has to invest more in governance and security for the social protection, culture and recreation to improve. One, if you do not have security, even in your day-to-day life, you cannot invest. That's a fact. If you do not have security, you cannot send your children to school. If you do not have security, you cannot do anything that a normal human being can do to better his life. So that's why we give governance 60% and social protection 40%.
Social protection, we found it is good to put it at 40%. Then governance, justice, and law and order, 60%. The governance, justice, law and order is wide and covers many state departments of the country, bearing in mind that it also provides a lot of collective services. It has 14 MDAs, yeah, and six on social protection. And the most important law about this sector, also it protects security, legal advice. So it's a collective responsibility of that department. They're also very important because if you look according to the way they are implemented, it seems that they were all planned well. It's only when it comes to implementation down there, there is a lot of corruption, no transparency, and maybe whatever is made on the desk is very good. But when it comes down there, along the way, it gets lost. And so it is not implemented well at the ground.